for the schedule to kind of be pushed back. There is a section that will be very short later on. So for these next couple of sessions, it will be important for us to have the full time. So if you're wondering about the timing, don't worry. We'll get finished in time for lunch. Okay? I just received on my phone an ad for Princess Cruises. And I looked at a little bit of it, and I want to go. I want to go as soon as possible. Because, what? No, this is in the South Pacific. Those islands down there, and maybe New Zealand. So I'm very attracted to that. And so I would like to show you a short video about cruise ships and other things. How do you choose? It is so unfortunate that in our country, so many people want church to be kind of like a cruise ship, to have their needs met. Remember the survey that Rick Warren Saddleback did about what is the purpose of our church? And 89% of the people answered in a way that said, our church is here to meet our needs and our family's needs. Do we want a cruise ship to make people comfortable? You know, something tells me, like it's actually the Bible, tells me that perhaps God is not intending for us to be on a cruise like the first one. He wants us to be on a cruise, though, like the second one. And that's why we're here. That's why we call this basic training. We used to call it boot camp, because we are preparing for the battle. And we are honored to be on the side of the winner. Because I read the last chapter or two. And it's like my wife reads, if she ever reads a novel, she reads the last chapter first. Well, she reads the first chapter to see who the main characters are. Then she reads the last chapter to find out how it turned out for them. And is it worth it to read all the way in between? Well, we kind of know the first chapters, and we understand the last chapters. Is it worth it to read in between where we get our marching orders? And I think God wants us to do that. So as we're talking about our mission, we could have a mission statement that says, the mission of our church is to make as many people happy and comfortable as possible. That would be a bit weak. But we could also have one that indicates that we're entering in we're experiencing a relationship with the living God, and we're in we're on a planet that is in absolute chaos, with people filled with conflict and on their way to destruction. Do we want to be a part of the rescue operation? Do we want to be in the battle against evil? Do we want to walk with Jesus as justified people who have been given the righteousness of Jesus Christ? Can you imagine that? That we have been given the righteousness of Jesus Christ. And we have been given the opportunity, with the presence of the Spirit of God, Christ in you, the hope of glory, we have been given the opportunity to live lives that more and more are like the righteousness of our Lord Jesus Christ as we walk with Him. And then there is truly no limit to what God can do with such lives. And as we think of the challenge of the Church of Slovakia, this is what it's all about. So let's think about the church as a battleship and not a cruise ship, and see how we come to it. Today, we're going to build upon what we were talking about last night. What is the mission of our church? Because that sets the main direction that we will always be moving. It's the course heading for our movement into battle. And now we're going to talk about core values. And I can't think of anything after mission that is more important than to think carefully through our core values. For they give a broader picture of what we will be like and what we will be engaged in. And so let's talk about that. One slide back, please. Just in the development of our strategic plan, the first was mission, now it's core values. Later on, we'll talk about the community to whom we will be ministering, the target community, the target group. And then, what is our vision that arises out of our understanding of mission, the development of our core values that describe us, and the target community that helps mold the direction and maybe some of the ways we do ministry, so that we're certain that we're communicating the gospel, the one gospel, in a way that will speak to the hearts of people. So, somebody have the clicker?
You want me to do it for you?
Yeah, but I don't know where it is.
The leader is there. Where's the leader? The page.
I always forget these. Thank you. Pastor Jude, my assistant. Because if I don't have assistants, I'm done. The next slide. You can be looking down at your page. What is the question that we're asking in terms of values? Well, it's kind of like we're looking into a mirror and we're asking ourselves, who are we? Or when we're a potential church plant, who will we be? What are the most important characteristics in our new church, of our new church? The development or the understanding of core values is an indispensable second step for the development of any ministry. Let's just say that again. An indispensable second step for the development of any ministry is to establish the biblical core values for that ministry. To do this is to save the ministry from disastrous errors, either of omission or commission, and in addition, will prevent us from many potential conflicts that we do not have to have in our church. The steps for developing core values, these are the issues that we will be talking about in the next 45 minutes or so. What are core values? How do core values impact our behavior? The danger of failing to establish clear core values. Key questions related to core values in determining them. And then we're going to do some practice stuff and see how that works. So what are core values? Core values are a statement of the things that are most important to the ministry. They are rooted in Scripture, they reflect God's values, and are always demonstrated by behavior. If you say something is a core value and it never shows up in what you do, in how you minister, in decisions you make, then it truly isn't a core value at all. There are two kinds of core values, actually. There's aspirational core values, those we hope to have or wish we had, and there are actual core values. All of us have core values, and all our churches have core values, but we need to think clearly to get the core values that the Bible leads us to, that the Lord and the Holy Spirit lead us to. Core values describe that which is non-negotiable in a ministry's life. Core values are a description of the most basic foundational convictions upon which the ministry will rest. Core values determine our priorities and help direct the decision-making process. Now, when we're trying to define something like this that we don't often think about, and it's kind of new, maybe even new to some of us to even talk about values that are core to who we are, it's sometimes helpful to talk about what they are not, to help us define what they actually are. Core values are not the vision, description, or the preferred future of the ministry. That vision, how we will be, what we will be 3 years, 5 years into the future, will arise out of our core values, and hopefully will be a demonstration of having lived out those values. Questions at any point? Core values are not the programs of the ministry, even the ones you highly favor. The programs are the means by which the values will be realized. So an example of a program or ministry is a monthly evangelism outreach event that we do, perhaps a concert or a meal that we invite people to with the purpose of sharing the gospel. A program we do for evangelism. An example of a related core value or a core value that caused us to do that was the priority of sharing the gospel with the unsaved. We have a core value that in our ministry, we are going to be always talking about reaching the unsaved with the gospel. That's our core value. That could be our core value. An example of a program or ministry, an apprenticeship ministry for the training of new youth workers in our church. An example of a related core value, our value is multiplication of ministries. Whenever we have a ministry, we're saying, in our church, we're going to be preparing to multiply it so that we will be constantly increasing the capacity of our church to minister to more people, or the capacity of our church planting system to reach more people, because we now have more well-led ministries. So multiplication of ministries is something we always are talking about and doing. And something that could come out of that would be an apprenticeship program for a specific ministry. Okay? You see the difference between a core value and a ministry program. Because we could say, well, we really value our prayer meeting. Well, we believe in prayer, don't we? Let me just follow the book. Core values are not the same as beliefs. An example of a belief, we believe in the power and importance of prayer. But a possible related core value that underlies that is that we value intimacy with God. We value intimacy with God, so we develop prayer ministries to help people experience that relationship. We might also, develop study and educational ministries so people can get to know who God is. We value intimacy with God, and therefore ministries flow out of that core value. An example of a belief, we believe in the truthfulness of the Bible. Almost every evangelical church would say that. An example of a possibly related core value, we value God's truth above everything. And therefore, we do Bible studies and, use the Bible in our discipleship ministry as the central core information that we're trying to pass on from ourselves to others, so that we're also passing on the life that is based upon that information to them as well. Core values impact behavior. Well, let me just repeat what we've just been saying then. Core values are not the vision of the church. Core values are not the programs of the church. Core values are not the beliefs of the church, the doctrinal statement, the statement of faith that we might put together and say, this is what we believe. Core values are what we treasure. And what we treasure in terms of how we are going to be, how we're going to operate, what our operational main principles are that will always be true. So core values impact behavior. What we believe to be true can impact our behavior or not. Can do it to some degree. However, people can believe things in their minds without having that belief impact how they live. We all know that. I believe in the omnipresence of God. But when I'm alone, I kind of put that belief aside and do what I want because no one else is watching. And I kind of forget the omnipresence and the omniscience of God. That is also true, and I believe it. And if I was at church and somebody asked me to tell them the attributes of God, I'd say He knows everything. And He's everywhere. But even though I might believe that, I may not be living according to that. So, we believe our statement of faith, our doctrine, which says that people without Christ will face God's eternal judgment and punishment. Does that belief cause us all to share the gospel as often as we have opportunity? Only if we value the eternal souls of people will we always be engaged at every opportunity in evangelistic relationships. I think in our country, almost everybody believes in the statement of faith. But very few of our people are engaged in sharing the gospel, which will enable people to experience eternity with the Lord and not in hell. Okay? Are you with me so far? Okay? Yes, sir.
Steve, I have a little problem with these words and expressions, and I do not want to be an academic here, but it seems to me that if I say that I believe in the omnipresence of God, but I act differently, I am proving that I ascend to the principle of omnipresence of God, but I do not believe. Belief is more than assent. Belief is more than agree that something is true. Belief in, well, I do not want to list the names of those, is
Absolutely. And we have a statement of faith or whatever we have in our church for a purpose and for a reason. And that is, these are non-negotiable. These are going to be the same, hopefully, in all of our churches and in all of our situations. So I'm sorry?
In our church, is everything negotiable, unfortunately.
Okay, and that's why I'm trying to help you to make them de-negotiable, some things. Many things can stay negotiable, but some things cannot, okay? The belief system, what we believe about the Bible, hopefully does not differ. And we believe in the central doctrines of the faith, the deity of Christ, the salvation by grace through faith, the supremacy of the Bible as our only authority that defines our relationship, who God is, and so forth. But now we're talking about what we do. And if we can establish the principles upon which we always operate, then it will help us to stay on track. I'm going to give you some stories to try to help you understand. If core values are not established for the ministry, every individual's core values will influence and tend to bring confusion to the planning process because everyone has unspoken core values. When people come into our church and have been a part of another church in their experience, they have core values that were probably formed and molded in that previous experience. For some people, they will come in and say, the most important thing that will happen in our church is personal evangelism. And we need to teach our people to evangelize on the street. Our core value is personal, confrontive evangelism. And I've had some of those people come in, and that's all they talk about. And so if they were put on the board of the church, on the elders board, the elders team, if we're trying to do something else or another approach, their values are going to come up every time, and we will have conflict and not be able to make decisions. Most strategic planning fails because values are not articulated at the beginning of the process, and differing core values will invariably lead to conflict within a ministry. There was a church plant in our 2 hours from my home, and I was the church planting director, so I was very involved with that church plant. They established their core values, and one of their core values was stated something like this: we will always be generous to people in our community, and generosity will characterize our church. They were having a vacation Bible school, and the early leadership team of the church plant were together. And one of the men said, well, I know what we are going to do. We are going to go down to the stores, the commercial businesses of our community, and we're going to ask them to give us prizes for the children and things that we can give away to the children. And we've done that before, and it's worked really well. We give things to the children, the store gives it to us. It's a really nice cooperative effort. The fact is that another person on the the provisional leadership team that was developing said, well, I know some of those store owners, and I know that they hate it when churches come in and ask for stuff for free. Because there are several churches in town, it's kind of a church habit to ask for stuff. And so when we walk in, they don't like it when we ask for them for these kinds of things. So others discussed it. At the end of the meeting, the pastor said, because they don't like it, we won't do it. And then at the next meeting, as they were preparing for the summer program for children, that one elder said, he brought in boxes. And he said, look, we have all these things. Where did you get them? We went down to the store, and we got them from the store. They gave them to us. And the pastor said, I thought we decided not to do that. And the other elder said, were they mad at us? And he said, I don't care. We have the things we need now for the children. And this became a battle in the new young church. They continually were upset with each other until the pastor, the planter, called me on the phone and said, could you stop by next time you're in our area? Hopefully very soon. Because we have a problem. And so I did. I came there very quickly. And I sat down with the pastor and I said, okay, you have this conflict. You're upset with him, he's upset with you. What is the problem? And he said, I don't know. We have a different opinion. I said, was he part of the establishment of your core values? Yes. Did he agree to the core values that you established for your church? Yes, he was all in favor of it. Then why is he violating the core value? And why aren't you bringing that up as the reason why he couldn't do that? You had established that you're going to be a giving church, not a taking church. And he made you a taking church. He violated your core values. When these kinds of conflicts come up, very often they are resolvable if you bring it back to your core values. A generous church is a powerful church, can be a powerful church in a community. I know a church when it was planted and when it grew larger, always gave to the community whenever it had the opportunity. It was in a larger city, and when the school in the city had a new principal, that's the main person of the school, is that a term you have? The headmaster, the person would come to the new school. He said, we will always visit that person. And our core value is to contribute to the well-being of our community. And so we go to the school. I welcome this new principal to the town. We talk for a little while and find out what we share in terms of our commitment to children and how we are alike in that. And then at the end of our conversation, our church has chosen to give a gift. And I take out of my pocket a $1,000 check. That's almost €1,000. A little less. And we give it to them and say, you may use this money in any way that you believe will enhance the experience of the children in their education. And he said, as I walk out the door, I always turn around and say, thank you for the conversation. Welcome again. And I want you to know where that came from, there is more if you need it. Here is our contact information. Generosity. That church can't stop growing, and they are committed to planting daughter churches. They do it in their own denomination and outside of their own denomination, as long as they share a commitment to biblical theology and practice. And they have planted dozens of churches because they keep giving away stuff. I like that core value. But see, it should have guided that original church in what they did. And it would have avoided conflict if they would have understood that core value had practical implications, which it should. Understand the illustration? Yeah.
There is the whole area of unspoken core value and even undiscovered core values. On the surface, you can have people who would agree with core value on paper, but life will prove that they live on the contrary.
That's correct.
So do you have some suggestion of the process how to do assessment? You need assessment for church values.
Yeah.
But there is the same need for core values.
Exactly.
So do you have some?
So in your selection of people for your core group, the ones you might invite or the ones who come and say, I'd like to be a part of this, you have an assessment process where you ask assessment-like questions. Our core values, if they're already established, our core values are as follows. And you show that to them. Do you have any problem with that? No. Would you tell me how you have lived out these core values in your life? Would you tell me how these have been important to you? Because we want them to be important to all of our leaders. So we never debate about what our core values are. We never debate about what our mission is. And we never have disagreements, hopefully, that conflict with our core values. So I would ask them questions. In a significant interview experience to see if the core values are also theirs, and to tell me how they have lived them out, how they have experienced the practice of those values themselves, and maybe talk to other people and say, we have these core values. Do you know if this brother might have displayed something different in his life? But ahead of time that your people are committed, so that you do not debate mission, core values, and vision, because we all agree upon that. And if we find out in the middle of operations that there is no agreement and that agreement is resisted, then we need to do what we can to make a change in who we have in that leadership. Is that kind of scary to think about? Anyway, that's what needs to happen. So the nice thing about church plants is that we can establish this stuff up front and when we're getting started. And it makes it a little bit easier because we don't have a history of doing it another way and believing and valuing things in a different way. We can establish that from the beginning. So, key questions about determining core values. What does God value most highly? Read, for example, the prayer of Jesus in John 17, the great prayer that has a recurring theme of unity and what unity is like in the church. Or the prayers of Paul in the epistles. We find out what the values of people are. If you go to a lot of prayer meetings in our country, prayer gatherings, you will find that most of the prayers have to do with people getting well when they're not feeling well or sick, for people having safety when they're traveling, and we ask God for them to come back safely. We ask sometimes for a little bit more significant things. But if we were to follow the prayers of Paul and pray for the kinds of things that he prayed for, and pray for the kinds of things that Jesus prayed for, it might change our whole list of what's valuable and important and help us to form our list of values. For what do you and the Lord want your ministry to be known? I had a man who was in our association, and he was a church planter, and he had a core value that stated that we will disciple everyone who comes into the circle of our church, or we will help them to become disciplers of others. The discipleship value was at the top of their list. After a few years, you could go to that church, and the first thing you would notice, the first thing you would hear about in people's lives is their effective ministries of relationships that have brought people to spiritual growth and effective ministry. They had, after a year, like 17 discipleship groups established with trained leadership that were helping people grow spiritually, because a lot of them had come to Christ at the early stage of that church plant. One day, that pastor was having a conversation with another pastor friend in the community. They were having lunch together, and our pastor was just talking about ministry, and the other guy stopped him and he said, "Pastor," he said, "do you know what the word is out on the street about your church?" And he said, "No. What are they saying out on the street?" It was kind of like the question that Jesus asked, "Who do people say that I am?" What are they saying about us? And he said, what they say is that if you want to become a disciple of Jesus Christ, go to the Evangelical Free Church in town. Wow. That was their core value, and they were living it out. It became what the church was known for, and it still is to this day. For what do you and the Lord, hopefully you're in agreement with the Lord about this, what do you want your ministry to be known for? What do you want them to say about your church? One of the recent churches that I was participating in as a member was a church that I talked about the first night, and that is one that had significant compassion ministries. And that was on the list of core values. We will engage with the community, and we will see how God will enable us to meet the needs and introduce people from it wasn't this unwieldy, but it was like that statement, from the fringes of our community, from the people who are poor and broken, and bring them to Christ. That's our core value. And that church accomplished that. Around our city, people knew that Enclave Church was a place where people not only could get food, but they could also find Jesus. And they could become servants of the living God if they were involved with that church. So, what do you want to be known for? What would God have you invest time and money? Pastor June was talking about that. Where do we spend our time and where do we spend our money? If you go to the calendar of the church and the church planter's calendar or the pastor's calendar, and you were able to examine it, and you were able to examine the financial records of the church where the money was spent, it wouldn't take you long to know what the core values of that church are. We value ministry to our children. And then you go to the church budget and you find 100 euros per year allotted to that. Is that a value? Is that a core value? Probably not. You find in the calendar many training events and development activities to develop leaders for children's ministry, then it would be a core value probably. And if the budget was more and so forth. You can tell a lot by how people spend their time or how a church spends their time and how they spend their money. So I'm going to ask you to do a little exercise right now. This is for a church, and this is kind of an evaluation of various things that happen in that church, and of the following: which are core values, which are beliefs, and which are programs. I'm not asking you to judge whether they are good or bad core values or programs. Hopefully they're not bad beliefs. But beliefs are something that would appear in our statement of faith, our doctrinal statement. Programs are something that would appear on our calendar. Core values are something that are always before us and determine what we do in our decisions for ministry. So, yes?
Steve, the word that we've translated is beliefs. We've translated it as convictions.
Convictions, okay, biblical convictions.
So, can you say what is the difference between a deep conviction and a core value?
The difference between a conviction and a core value is that a core value describes how we operate. A conviction is what we are basing everything upon, a biblical conviction. Daniel, would you help us answer that question? What would be the difference between a belief and a core value in your view? A conviction and a core value.
I think conviction probably overlaps with values. But yeah, like you mentioned earlier, they're different things. I mean, what you believe is different than really the values are really how you live your life.
How you live your life. That's correct.
Where it comes from.
You know what? Before we do this, let me do the next slides and talk about examples of core values that I would suggest could be used, for example, for a church.
You want the example of core values that are there?
Yeah, the examples. Perhaps if I was planting a church now, this is what I would have as a list of core values. These are the things that we would want to be true about our church. For example, every person a witness. Our core value is to have everyone in our church be a positive witness for Christ, based upon Acts 1:8, which we believe to be true.
And how is that not a conviction?
What?
And how is that not a conviction?
How- It is a value because it is countering what almost every church that has that other conviction does. In other words, every church believes that Acts 1:8 is what it says it is, that we are witnesses when the Holy Spirit has come upon us. And we will preach. All of us are witnesses for Jesus. But we value the actual experience of that. And so we're going to make decisions that lead us to helping our people to become witnesses.
Steve, can you say that the conviction, you can be convicted about something, like, for example, sharing the gospel, but it doesn't really push you to do it.
Right.
But when you do it, it becomes a value to you.
Yes.
So core values will push you to do the action.
Yes. Our core values will tend to be things that are not likely to be done in our church, because if we would do them naturally, we wouldn't have to state them. Yes. Yeah, go first and
I
then.
guess I would explain it this way. You caught me off guard when you asked.
I know.
I just sat down.
Oh, you did.
Values are part of a culture. So values are part of a culture, or if you think at the individual level, values are part of your personality. Okay? They're the things. So a belief, if you think about a church or something, your doctrinal statement, your beliefs,
Convictions.
convictions even, I still think there's overlap, but there's a big difference between saying we believe X, Y, Z, right? And then describing what's the culture of your church. But if you were to describe the culture of your church, and then the culture of your church, and the culture of your church, there are going to be differences. And part of the way you would describe the differences would be by what is valued in that particular community. I don't know, hopefully that's helpful. But
Right.
I think it's very helpful to go back to your first statement. The core values is always associated with your behavior, with your actions. But convictions sometimes do not come out in your actions. You just believe it.
What core values do is force you within the context of this church to live out your convictions, is really what they're doing.
So maybe a better way for us to say is that what kind of culture do you want to build?
That would be a way to do it. Yeah. This is a description of your church's culture, yes.
Because it seems, at least in my understanding, that the overlap between the terms is very, very big. Conviction and that maybe creating the culture is something which is distinct from
action.
Okay.
So a negative, a bad example, I'd say, Steve, you've seen this too, is like churches in the U.S. like to list their values, like on their website. But I would say 90% of them do it wrong. Okay? So they say, we value God, we value the Bible, we value evangelism. Well, those aren't core values. They don't really describe the culture of your church. Because everybody has those. And they're really just restating their doctrinal statement.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, if that's just a restatement of the doctrinal statement, would a core value be then taking the Bible to interpret and apply the Bible with authorial intent? Would that be a core value?
What kind of intent?
Authoritative. As the author meant it to be taken.
Yes. Yes, it's based upon, for example, Acts 1:8 implies we're all witnesses, but most churches don't cultivate a culture in which that happens. So that is what we are going to work toward and be. Okay? So when you become part of our congregation, being a witness is not going to be kind of an optional thing that we teach. You can obey it or you don't have to obey it. But in our church, because we believe in the centrality of that we will always be helping you to live this out, no matter who you are. Yes.
I have just a question for clarifying. So can we say that core values are the particular convictions which we decided to stress in unnegotiable way in our church?
Yes. Yes. The things that we are stressing out of our list of beliefs that will transform our behavior into certain directions. Yes. That was a good way of stating it.
In our church plan, all our leaders and all members did not experience planting church. And yet, our core value is multiplication of churches. And so, I have to teach it to them and say, this is what we're going to do. So, it was very helpful for us, especially for me, to know that this is the core value of the church. Because I'm teaching them that this is where we're going. Even though not a single member, not a single leader, when we first planted the church after 3 years, did not experience anything of that in their past life.
Yeah.
Now they're experiencing that in the church that they belong to. So, it is very important that you articulate it first, because people are coming to your church and you teach them that this is where the church is going. We're going to disciple people, we're going to witness the unbelievers in our community.
So I would want to have a church, yes?
Sorry, I have another one question.
Yeah.
If the core value is something which we stress, shouldn't some of those core values, which are written there, should be, or aren't there some convictions which should be all the times in all churches core values? Because can we negotiate in the church that everyone should be witness? It's something which we have to put as a core value.
Yeah, if we don't in our culture, we will not move in that direction. It's just a reality that all the pressures of life will pull people away from this. But if we're convicted that it's a core reality in our church, then we won't forget it when we're teaching children, when we're in our worship, when we're preaching sermon, when we're talking to people one-on-one. We are committed to helping them move on a road toward being an active and capable witness for Jesus. Okay?
Without the core value of the mission, your church will become a cruise ship. It will cruise ship. It will aim for comfortable. It will aim for what is my need, my family's need. You need to meet it. But if you have a mission that is well stated and core values well stated, say, oh, we're going into this direction. And the direction is we're going to disciple people and be a witness.
One of the most common things with this first core value in our country that people say when they're serious about being followers of Jesus and they're serious about the church and wanting to help out, they say, but I don't have the gift of evangelism. I leave that to the pastor and the 4 other people who have the gift of evangelism. And yet the Bible doesn't teach that you have to have the gift of evangelism to be a witness. A witness is somebody who just talks about what's happened to them and the reality of life. And so people don't become witnesses because they aren't gifted evangelists. So this counters that concept. The core values that we state are often to counter the natural trend of the way that churches go. And so we actually have picked out, you mentioned a core value last night in your church, that you're non-programmatic, right?
Yeah, so when I do the vision piece, I can tell a story about how we develop core values in our church. And that might be a helpful illustration. But I don't remember your name over there on the couch, but I think Sam. But your first comment was extremely helpful in understanding it's what we stress, because Steve, you'll probably get to it. But how many core values should a church have, right? Because you have maybe 100 values, right? But you're not going to list them all. You're only going to select a few because that's what the culture you want to create and what you want stressed. I thought that was a great way.
Yeah.
I strongly believe that what was mentioned yesterday, that there shouldn't be the same church on every places. The fight for core value is what we would stress from the whole teaching of the Bible to our current situation of the culture of the city, culture of the state, culture of people who came to our city, to our church. What is the most danger in our generation? What is necessary to be read from the Bible as the understanding of the gospel for our current target group, our current people, where we have to be against the culture of the society, where on the contrary, it's necessary to encourage good part of culture in the city. And so this is the fight of what from the whole teaching of the Bible would make a breakthrough in our setting, in our calling to our target group, to our city, to
Yes.
culture of this generation.
And will help ensure the application of key scriptures so that we become what God wants us to be. You won't not teach all the other values as you go through the scriptures. You will not skip any of the beliefs when you come upon them or the convictions that you come upon, and you will teach them clearly. But you will also very frequently bring your core values back into the attention of the people, because that's what the church is moving toward. That's what it's looking more and more like at a certain point. So let me talk about the rest. The reason I have that number one is that most people don't witness. So I want to be a church that has a comprehensive witnessing going on. And every person discipleship. I look at churches in our context, and most of them are not discipling their people. They don't have any plan or strategy to do it. They don't have relational ministries that are conducive to bringing spiritual growth to people and helping to equip people for the next generation of workers and leaders in our church. So, every person, discipleship. Either people will be discipled if they are not, new Christians, untaught Christians who come into our church, people who have come to understand the basic elementary truths of the Bible but need to know the Lord much more deeply. We'll have a discipleship ministry that will not only emphasize knowing things but living according to what they learn. So we'll have relational discipleship happening. Either a person will be a discipler or be a disciple or be both. We're going to have as our goal everybody involved in that, and not just sitting there listening to sermons and we have no idea what they're doing with the information that they're getting. Every leader, worker, and ministry, multiplication. Now that ties to discipleship, but whenever we do something that is working, we want to multiply it. We want to have another one so that we're constantly increasing our capacity for ministry. One of the things that stops us from growing is that we're not developing the next generation of servants, workers, and leaders in the church. So I want to be a church that multiplies them. Generosity at every opportunity. That's the core value of that church that gave money to the schools. Every situation, honesty. I find in America that we have a great commitment to the truth, but we are not so good at honesty. And we tend to wear masks in our churches because we all come with the smile mask or the happy mask or the contented mask. But when we get to know each other, if we do, we find that people have a lot of stuff that they are not able to deal with. And so we want to develop a church where it's okay to tell the truth and not hide. So that's the kind of church I like, I would want to be a part of. And when I present such a thing to people, I find that people find that attractive compared to the church experiences that they've been in before. Perhaps I can grow. Perhaps I can become significant. Perhaps I can learn how to relate to people and so forth. In our family, it's a few slides down, number 57.
Marriage and family core values.
Examples of core values for marriage and family. My wife and I, early in our marriage, not early enough, after we had experienced a number of struggles, decided to work on this for ourselves. And we established core values for us. And we stated them in statements like this. We will never let the sun go down on our anger. Now that's a biblical teaching, but we're now focusing on that and making that a priority of our lives. And when we know it's our core value and we share that together, we try to talk things through every time we're having a misunderstanding or a conflict. Honesty and openness is essential in all situations. Well, we know that there is to be intimacy and openness in a marriage. The two become one flesh. We're to live out the one fleshness. But that's a hard one for me sometimes. So I put it as a core value so that I'm reminded about that and that we're both committed to it. We will always be involved in serving as well as leading. Both of us are leaders. And it's easy to become just a leader and forget the serving part. But to remember that in the process of leading people to be servants, it is crucially important that we also experience that. And we know what that is like. And, of course, that we can serve as an example. So we'll always be serving as well as leading in the church. We're in a church plant, in a rented school building. I'm involved often in setting up the chairs, helping the children, the early childhood department haul all of their stuff in there for their ministry and clean it up afterwards. Being involved in passing out the worship brochures, the bulletins sometimes. Being there to help with some things that sometimes leaders don't do, but we're going to be doing that. We will never allow debt to carry over from month to month. So I had a problem with that. I had to get out of debt. And when we came to this conclusion, I was still in debt, but we were working toward it. And now that is the case. The discipleship of our children is our number one ministry priority. Children can sometimes be forgotten in the busyness of church leadership and life and pastoring and so forth. But we keep reminding ourselves, for us, there's a slight different word there. The discipleship of our grandchildren is our number one priority whenever we have that opportunity, and they live close to us, so we have that opportunity. So that guides our life in some significant applications of things that we would otherwise probably let slip. Because, boy, that new computer in the store looks so appealing to me. Why don't I just put it on my credit card and pay it off over the next year or whatever? We're not doing that now. We have a lot more. We don't have a big income, but we have a lot more ability to give and to be generous because we're not in debt. Okay? Is that kind of helpful? We're countering the things that would normally probably not happen in our culture, and we're trying to develop a new culture. And these core values help to guide that. And we're yes, selecting some scriptures that we see as very important to give attention to and to focus on, so that we can be like that church that had a core value of discipleship and lived it out. But the other church was jealous about it. And he said, how could we become a church like yours? Because we hear what is happening to people in your church. Okay? Let's do that little exercise and see how it goes. See where we are on this. Which of the following are core values, which are beliefs, and which are programs? Home Bible studies. What would you say that is? A program, okay. Ministering in teams. Why is it a core value? Okay, you can't put it in the calendar of the church. You can't say on Wednesday at 7 or 19, we ministering in teams. Yeah, it doesn't work, okay? So it describes a core value. Inspiring worship. Program? Pardon me? Belief? Yeah, how you look at that one could be one of any of those in reality. I kind of look at it as a core value. I don't know how to describe worship the way I want to, but the fact that it's got an adjective on it kind of makes it less a program and more what kind of worship we're having. Okay? But that could be argued on that one. Large attendance. That's one of the most important core values in the American church. It's not necessarily a good one. Because if that's driving you, you're going to very possibly compromise a lot of biblical truths to get there. But large attendance could be a core value, and I've been in a church where that is true. Comprehensive disciple making. Okay, core value. It's describing the scope of disciple making in our church. Salvation by grace alone. Luther. I'm sorry? Conviction, okay. Yeah, you'd put conviction. Contemporary worship services. What did you say? A wish. Okay, it could be a desired core value. Aspirational. Or, for somebody, it might be, boy, that's a negative core value, depending on where you come from and how old you are. Small groups. Probably that's a program. Yeah. We're going to emphasize small groups in our church. Multiplication of ministries. I'm sorry, I described it as a core value when I just said that, didn't I? It could be a core value as well, but it's probably a ministry. Okay.
If you change number 8 to discipleship through small group ministries, does that become a core value?
That becomes a core value. Yeah, because that will define how we develop our small group ministry to make sure that that's what happens in them. Prayer meetings. Prayer meetings. Okay, you can put that on the calendar. We're going to have a prayer meeting on Saturday evening. Okay? I know. But I have a very short one coming, so we're all right. Okay. We're going to have no, we're not going to have a break. Well,
Steve, talk about the steps to determining your core.
yeah.
I think that's very important.
Let's go to slide 58. Steps to determining your core values. So if you're here as a team for a church plant or an imagined team for an imaginary future possible church plant, or what you would like your current, oh no, I better not do that. But or if you just work together with somebody else and just want to discuss this. Identify a list of possible core values. State the biblical basis for each value. Group similar statements together. Highlight the ones that are the most important. Check for completeness. Does this list include all the important areas of your church's priorities? And by the way, if you have too many of these, they lose the value of even having them. So it's important, as I say here, reduce the list to maybe 5 or 7 core values so that it can be remembered and be a factor in all of our decision and planning processes. Be sure that you're able to clearly communicate the value and its biblical basis to others. Okay? So that's the project. And so I'm going to ask you to just take a little bit of time. It says 20 minutes, but we won't probably do that. But take 10 minutes to start thinking. Start thinking about what core values are needed in a church plant that you would lead. And it's a tentative list is fine, but just start thinking, what would be core values? What would counter the normal way that people would tend to not be obedient followers of Jesus? What would counter that and make sure that our church was emphasizing really important things?